We delightfully welcome all of you to our session today on shaping the web's future with decentralized knowledge graphs. As today is World Wide Web Day, let's learn about its golden legacy and its hopeful future, from centralized hypertext to a decentralized network with the help of knowledge graphs and Web3 technologies. And what better way to learn than from our honored speaker today, Professor Oshani Seneviratne, who obtained her SM and Ph.D. degrees in computer science from MIT under the supervision of Sir Tim Berners-Lee himself, the inventor of the World Wide Web. Professor Oshani is an assistant professor of computer science at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, where she leads the blockchain-based, resilient, accountable, intelligent network systems, or the BRAINS lab. She is also the associate director of the Tetherless World Constellation at Rensselaer. Her primary research interest is in decentralized systems, and she conducts applied research in health informatics and decentralized finance. She has also previously served as the Director of Health Data Research at Rensselaer and as a Senior Software Engineer at Oracle Incorporated. It is clear that Professor Oshani Seneviratne is a perfect speaker to lead the session on this significant day. So without further delay, we hand over the session to you, Professor.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So let me share my screen. And okay, you can see my screen, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So I have, prepared the slide deck and feel free to, interrupt me any time during any of the slides. I have lots of information. So I would much rather prefer a more of an interactive, lecture than, me, going through the slide deck, right? So feel free to interrupt me. And if I don't see your question, maybe the host can let me know if there's a question, okay? So the title of the talk is Shaping the Web's Future with Decentralized Knowledge Graphs. So more than the past, in this talk, I want to talk about the future because we want to kind of apply that our predecessors have developed in doing something better for the world. And so this talk is a little bit more future focused than the past focused. Now, the wonderful introduction, gave a nice background about myself, but I thought of including a slide about myself. So I'm currently an assistant professor in computer science at RPI. Many of you might not be that familiar about this institute. So RPI stands for Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And this is known as the oldest technological university in the US, where engineering degrees were first offered in the US. So it's a pretty old university. And this year, we are actually celebrating our 200th anniversary since its founding. And even though I do research on the web and web-based systems, I teach very much AI-centered courses. So I teach a course called AI and Blockchain that I created. I also teach a very introductory course on AI called Introduction to AI. And I also teach a very fun course called AI in Fiction and Fact, where I actually show movies in the class, have lively debates about how to tease out, fiction from fact, especially in the way that news media reports AI advancements. And I research decentralized systems, which is broadly, the web, which is the, the goal of, today's talk. I also do work on blockchain quite a bit and knowledge graphs. And I also do applied AI in health informatics and fintech. And as the introduction mentioned, I got my PhD and master's from MIT. I forgot to include this. I got my bachelor's degree from University of Moratuwa in Sri Lanka. And my doctoral and master's supervisor was Tim Berners-Lee, who is the inventor of the World Wide Web. Okay, so I first want to give, like my research interest might seem a little bit eclectic. So I want to kind of provide the motivation as to why I'm in this space. So Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web in 1989. And in this picture on the left-hand side, you can see some of the early, web browsers and web applications that Tim developed. Now, the World Wide Web, like, right now, we cannot imagine a world without the web. But my parents could actually imagine a world without the web because they did not grow up in a world with the web. And, as you can see, like, from the website registrations, like, it has had this exponential growth. And I want to draw a parallel between the web and the blockchain. And actually, like, the term Web3 has been applied to blockchain-based applications. So these are not direct comparisons, but, things like Bitcoin valuation, obviously it goes up and down, right? But what's interesting is, like, if you take these Ethereum addresses, which are identities on these blockchain platforms, it has been steadily growing. So that shows some like steady adoption of these technologies. And similar to the web, there are many application areas. Not all of them are successful, but things like decentralized finance has been very successful, and it has a very high market cap right now. So why am I interested in Web3 and blockchain? It's because just like the web, I believe that Web3, possibly with the integration of AI technologies, is on this 30, if not 50-year growth phase right now. And there are lots of opportunities for grow, like, you can propose new, technologies, and like, it can really make a difference in the world. So that's why I am interested in really both these areas. So the topic of the talk today is on knowledge graphs. And I'm not sure how many of you know about knowledge graphs, let alone decentralized knowledge graphs. And of course, I think we all know about AI. AI has taken the world by storm. And I think, knowledge graphs and decentralized knowledge graphs have a very direct correlation, or like an application in AI. So there are things like, enhanced search and information retrieval. So there are things like, semantic search, where, knowledge graphs can improve search engines by understanding the context and intent behind user queries. So knowledge graphs actually has a very rich history. Like it spans like, maybe 2 or 3 decades. But it was actually Google that popularized the term knowledge graphs. So if you search for something on Google, if it's a well-known term with lots of information, you might find these knowledge snippets that has some structured information. So that, I would say, led to the popularity of knowledge graphs. And so natural language processing, like, in AI systems, we need NLP for contextual understanding, things like question answering, where KGs can be used to develop systems that answer questions by querying a graph. So you get like, really definite answers. Like, one problem with large language models is hallucination, but by incorporating a knowledge graph that potentially has authoritative and vetted facts, you can have a more definitive, like, non-hallucinated answer. And then recommendation systems, we are constantly bombarded with these, personalized recommendations. So KGs can be used to model user preferences and relationships between, products and things like that. Fraud detection and risk management, I'll talk about that a little bit in my talk because I have done some work in that. So, KGs can model complex relationships and transactions that can help to identify patterns that, deviate from the norm. And also, like, things like risk assessment, knowledge management and integrations. Of course, like, knowledge graphs have, I guess, cleaned up versions of the data. So that's, better in improving the quality of these AI models. And some application areas, like healthcare, biomedical applications, explainable AI, and robotics, autonomous systems. Now, I won't go into too much detail, but I have done some work in all of these areas. So this is to kind of set the stage for decentralized knowledge graphs and AI. I also want to talk about the synergistic combination between Web3 or blockchain and AI. So the combination of these two things can enable things like decentralized data sharing, incentive mechanisms for model training and inference, things like decentralized autonomous organizations. Now, these terms might be new to some of you. So with blockchain technologies, you can actually write a piece of code, you can deploy it, and then you can let it run, right? And then you can create these like something like a startup where you don't actually have any kind of manual intervention, but the code takes care of things on its own. So there are lots of interesting potential in Web3 and blockchain with the combination of AI. And so just to set the context, like, you may have seen, this cartoon, which appeared in way back in 1990s on the New York Times Magazine. This cartoon says, on the web, nobody knows you're a dog. And right now, our AI systems are so good that, you can, actually do these autonomous organizations, deploy them, and they can even make money. So things have, progressed a lot. And, we are at this stage where, we can apply the same thing and say on the blockchain, nobody knows you're an AI. Okay, so I've been throwing this term Web3, but you might wonder, were there Web 1s and Web 2s and Web 3s? The answer is yes. Of course, there was no such thing as Web 1, because that's the original web. So this is the static web, where people could simply read content. Now, Tim Berners-Lee, when he invented the World Wide Web in 1989, he didn't actually want it to be a static web. He wanted it to be a bidirectional web, where people can actually post updates to these so-called static websites. But for many reasons, the original web ended up being a very, very static web. And then Web 2, which was very popular in the early 2000s, was this dynamic web, where you could obviously read like the original web, but there were these REST principles, representational state transfer architecture for the web, that enabled websites to respond to several different methods. These are called HTTP methods, where you can post some content. And that enabled this second version of the web, writable and also interactable, right? So that led to many of these websites that we use today, because they are very much interactable, right? Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram, if they are not interactable, they are pretty much unusable, if you can imagine. So Web3, now the definition of Web3 is a little bit debatable, because the original definition for Web3 came from the semantic web community. So what the semantic web community wanted was, the community wanted these three things, plus they wanted the web to be meaningful. So it's something like, if I make an assertion about some fact in the world, right? So something like Oshani works at RPI, right? Now, I might have a website that writes down that particular fact. But if you take the separate entity, so I'll have a website and my university has a website. And if I make a link to the website in the current web, it's very much, it's not a named edge, right? So if you think from a graph point of view, when I add a hyperlink to my website, I create an edge to another entity. But a simple HTML link is not meaningful. But if you annotate that link saying this is my home institution, then that particular assertion becomes meaningful. So the semantic web community wanted it to be, wanted the web to be meaningful in addition to being read, write, and interactable. Now, with the advent of blockchain technologies, this notion of ownable web also came into the picture. So what do we mean by ownable web? So you probably have heard of things like NFTs, non-fungible tokens. So there, the idea is like, you own some particular asset. So for example, in my earlier example, my homepage is something that I own, right? And it should also be verifiable. The fact that like, I can make updates to my website makes the association between myself and my website verifiable. So there are some economics involved, like, yes, like, just like NFTs, you can attach some value to these assets. But at a very fundamental level, if you take the money aspect out, we are saying that the ownable web, has ownership, and the owner of the particular asset must be verifiable, right? So where do I stand? I would like Web3 to be both semantic and ownable, right? So getting the best of both of these, like, two definitions, so to speak. Okay, so now that the definition of Web 1, Web 2, Web 3 is out of the way, let me talk about something called linked data and then also knowledge graphs. So if you haven't seen this already, I recommend you take a look at Tim Berners-Lee's TED Talk back in 2009. This is a very inspirational talk, and you might actually get a lot out of this talk about the history of the web. But more importantly, like, this particular talk had this call to action where Tim wanted people to put out, like, more linked data. So linked data is, as I mentioned earlier, like, it's like two data points that are linked in a meaningful way. And he had this 5-star rating system. So if you have some data on the web with an open license, so it could be a PDF document, like, he said, okay, that's great, you get a 1 star. And if you had machine readable data, something like an Excel sheet, right, which is machine readable, you get 2 stars. If you use a non-proprietary format, so that many softwares can interoperate with that particular format. For example, like, Excel can be opened in a handful of software solutions out there, right? But if you had the same data exposed in CSV, which is a non-proprietary format, many software clients can open that. So if you have the data in that format, you get 3 stars. And you get 4 stars if you use standards. So RDF is a W3C standard called Resource Description Framework. So you get 4 stars if you have your data in this RDF standard, which actually adds, like, more semantics, more relationships, and it's much linked. And you get 5 stars if you actually link the data. And this linkage actually results in a knowledge graph, right? So, and we discussed the benefits of knowledge graphs. So just imagine, like, having a lot of these open link data will make the world a better place, like, having access to this, like, machine readable data. So after his talk, people started putting out data, and, like, you can see the nucleus of this linked open data is this thing called DBpedia. DBpedia project started with a very simple, like, idea, like, what the team did was they took the info boxes of Wikipedia, which has structured information. So they extracted that and created this massive, database of Wikipedia articles. And because Wikipedia has pretty much everything under the sun, that ended up being this nucleus when other people started, putting out their data and making links to concepts in Wikipedia. So the different color coding denotes different domains. So you can see how many of these domains can interoperate with each other. So this is the linked data cloud in 2014, approximately 10 years ago. And right now, this is the linked open data cloud right now. Granted, many of these data silos might not actually be fully live, but there was a tremendous effort to put data out by many different organizations all over the world. And as you can see, there's geographical data, there's government data, life sciences data, and life sciences actually constitute a very, very thick cloud. So bioinformatics researchers benefit from life sciences data quite a lot because they are semantics oriented and they're interlinked. And you can see linguistics, several media, for example, BBC has a triple store, a knowledge graph, publications data, social networking. So, and this keeps growing. However, there are certain limitations of linked open data. So first of all, the quality of the data is sometimes questionable. It is human curated, but data sets may contain errors. There can be inconsistencies, outdated information. And also there are problems with the data governance and privacy. So the linked open data cloud works if all the data that you want to make available are public. But as you probably know, there is a lot of data which is not public and still very useful, right? In fact, because in this day and age, we hear a lot about large language models, these trillion token models or trillion parameter models, they are estimating that, for those models, all of text that's publicly available has been used in the training process. So where do we go from there if all of the, training data has been exhausted? All of the public data sources have been exhausted, right? So, so we need, and we cannot make private data public. So there has to be a, viable solution for that. And the viable solutions may involve robust access controls, anonymization techniques, even federated large language models, for example. And then the last one is the biggest problem in this space, sustainability and maintenance. Now, if any of you have hosted a site, you know that it costs money, right? It's not free to actually run a server, right? And if you have large amounts of data, like disk space, electricity, all those things cost money. So a sustainable way of maintaining these data sources is a question mark. So that's where things like ownable assets can come into the picture, because if you can monetize these data sources, then it could be sustainable. Okay, so I've been talking about knowledge graphs and decentralized knowledge graphs, and I gave an example in in words. But if you were to visualize something, it'll look like this. So the nodes in this knowledge graph are certain entities, and they can be historical figures like Da Vinci, Mona Lisa, the painting, right, or places. Right? Or it could be people, like Lily and James here. So you have these, connection between these two individuals. You can even have biographical information about these people, all represented in a knowledge graph. Now, as you can imagine, not all of these knowledge is in one silo, like, it could be distributed across like, several different, silos. But this linkage, helps with the connection, right? And how do we know that this James is, let's say, James A and not James B? It's because each of these entities will have a unique identifier, which is manifested in a universal resource identifier, or a URI. So URI is very similar to a URL, but it may not be dereferenceable, right? So once you click like, google.com, we know that it goes to the homepage of Google and you can search for things, but these URIs are simply identifiers. If they are dereferenceable to a meaningful web page, that's very, very good, but it doesn't have to be. All right, so now that we know what a knowledge graph is, hold on, I saw a question. Okay, so there's a question asking me Web3 means decentralized, but there were terms like Web 5.0, Web 6.0 as well. Do they all mean the same, or are there any variations? To the best of my knowledge, like, people can come up with like, various, incarnations of the web. I've seen that with like things like 3G, 4G, 5G, 6G. But I don't think that terms like, Web 5.0, Web 6.0 has a very, strong definition at this point. So far, like, Web 3 is what people are talking about, and they have a precise or a crisp definition at this point. So that's the answer I can give. And if you have any follow-up, like, feel free to ask away. All right, I'm going to take a sip of water. Okay. Okay, cool. So what does a decentralized knowledge graph enable? Now, DKG, is a global knowledge graph that comprises of a shared set of verifiable assertions that are not tied to a central authority. And unlike the linked open data cloud we saw earlier, it can be both public and private. And smart contracts will allow users to contribute to the knowledge graph in a secure and an incentivized manner. And so this will enable things like knowledge sharing and collaboration, proper long-term sustainability and data stewardship, ownership and control of the resources in the KG, and various advanced analytics. Now, in the next, I guess 10 to 15 minutes or so, I will talk about some of my research at a very high level. Of course, like, each of these topics will be 20 minutes long, but my idea is to give you a high-level overview of this work in case like you're interested in working in these topics for yourself. So I'll briefly talk through like, these, 3 domains: scientific knowledge sharing, collaborative decentralized knowledge graph construction, and even like, I think I have a robotics application. Okay, so the first topic is incentivized accountable research data sharing ecosystem as a DKG. Now, with the large language models, you must have heard of all these lawsuits against, companies like OpenAI, Microsoft, in the case of like, Copilot, because the data was scraped from the open internet, the web, and, a common misconception that people have is like, if something is on the web, it's free for use. So it's not the case. In fact, like, if there's content on the web without a permissive license explicitly stated, that means all rights reserved by the owner of that content, right? The problem comes in the enforcement of this, because not many people would care about, like, a model using that. In fact, in the case of Google, for example, many website owners would like Google to, crawl the web pages and, like, update Google's indices for better search results, right? Because people want other people to discover their web pages. But this is a very, very gray area. The lawsuits are still ongoing, and it's a very complex issue. So having said that, like, we try to tackle this, like, problem of research data sharing. So it's not the whole web, but we've taken a small subset of this open data, and it might not actually be open as well. Like, this is like, valuable data that would be beneficial if it was shared. So the problem is, like, research data sharing. I'm not sure, like, how many of you are engaged in research. So I work with lots of biomedical research groups, and a common problem that they have is, from the inception of an idea, the bench, and the application of the research idea, like, or the bedside in a clinical application, takes a very, very long time. In some cases, it can be as long as 10 to 20 years. And why is that the case? Because it takes a lot of time to convert it into a research study, to collect the data, right? And especially if you're talking about a clinical application, it has to go through government approvals and things of that nature. So, and however, like, during this whole process, even though it takes time, there's a lot of data that gets, created or generated. And there's some value in sharing that data, right? Because other people can come to, interesting conclusions, right? But people do not really want to share their data because of this problem called researcher's dilemma. Actually, we coined this term based on prisoner's dilemma that you may have heard from game theory. So what do we mean by this? This is when two rational individuals might not cooperate, even if it appears that it's in the best interest to do so, right? So there's some kind of conflict between individual rationality and a collective rationality, right? So individual rationality, okay, so I might not get the credit for this data that I have labored over if I share that, right? So as I said, like, it's modeled after prisoner's dilemma. I encourage you to look it up if you're interested. And here, like, we want to reward reproducible research and peer verification for doing this end-to-end, or like, engaging in this end-to-end process. And we want to tokenize the research rewards. So we created something called Science Index. I'm sure you have heard of something called the H Index. So H Index is an estimate of how many papers has a particular researcher published that have at least H number of citations, right? So currently, like, my H index is 19. That means I have published at least 19 papers, each with at least 19 citations. So as you can imagine, like, it takes a long time to get these, like, citation count up, right? And people have, engaged in various, like, bad behaviors, like, citation collusion rings, right? So there are lots of problems with H index. And the biggest problem that I see with the H index is that it's not rewarding data. It's only rewarding scientific publications. So to kind of mitigate this issue, like, we came up with the Science Index, and it's a recursive acronym for science capability-based, intention-centric, experiment-oriented, networked collaborative expression. So with this science index, we want to reward researchers for their data contributions. And we are not saying that this is going to replace H index. H index is for publications, but it could supplement the H index. And in our experiments to overcome the cold start problem, because we don't have the data, right, to start a science index. So what we did was we took data from publication data from the Microsoft Academic Graph. I believe it's called something else right now, but when we were doing this research, it was called the Microsoft Academic Graph, and also data from Semantic Scholar and data citations from DataCite. So I'm not going to go through the details of the construction of the science index, but I want to show you the results of science index. So, so here, in this graph, there is a noticeable density of points at lower values of H index and the predicted science index that indicates that most observations have relatively low H index values. And as the H index increases, the spread of predicted values also increase, showing there's more variability in the predictions for higher H index values, right? So in simple words, what is it saying? You don't have to have a high H index to have a high science index. And then we also did this, thing, a plot with the science index versus the career length. So if you're looking at the H index, you get a high H index if your career length is very high, right? But science index, it's kind of aligned to the left because we are not really worried about aggregating citation counts. So in some ways, in terms of data set sharing, it's a much more equitable index. Then we also did some experiments with two groups of researchers. There's this term called Global North and Global South. So Global North are these resource-rich countries. So we picked, several researchers from these, resource-rich universities like, Stanford University, McGill University, MIT, right? And we also picked some global South universities, like universities in South America, in Asia, for example. And then we plotted the researchers' H index versus researcher science index. So what you can see here is that in H index, the mean of the South and the North do not really align that much, but with the science index, they kind of align, quite closely. So what does it say? It's saying that regardless of your resource richness or resource poorness, you actually have a better shot at getting recognized with the science index compared to the H index. All right, so we have an open source code, and I welcome you to check it out if you're interested in this kind of research. So we have smart contracts, we have data ingestion pipelines, we have these things called oracles. All of these details I didn't have time to go through, but yeah, I encourage you to check it out and connect with me offline if you're interested. Okay, how are we doing? Any other questions? Okay, no. So the next idea I want to talk to you about is something called, swarm contracts. Now, this, term, swarm, you probably have heard in applications like robotics. And in fact, the initial application was in robotics, and we applied this, in things like, indoor mapping scenarios. So as you can imagine, we have Google Maps for mapping outdoor things, but if you have a very large shopping mall or convention center, for example, there are potentially things of interest, and it doesn't have to be a indoor mapping thing. It could be an area that the Google vehicle cannot go, right? So it could be like a hiking path, right? Here, like, we were trying to figure out, like, can we incentivize both the robotic agents and also humans to build these indoor maps so that we have a knowledge graph of places of interest, or points of interest rather. So the idea behind swarm contracts is that we want to incentivize cooperative behavior over the long term, because they are working as a swarm. So they have to, like, have some kind of collaboration. And we also want to disincentivize adversarial behavior over long term, because one problem when we when we are decentralizing a potential application is that not everyone is acting in good faith. So we have to have these robust adversarial models to minimize those kinds of attack vectors. So here is, like, the end-to-end architecture. We have, like, these turtle bots that, actually this is the part of the robotic agent. But as you can see, like, there are these, like, users that can interact with this robotic agent. And in some cases, the users will act like the boss of the whole system, telling, like, okay, so this is the area that you should go and map. Okay, so how are we doing on time? All right, so next, I want to talk about knowledge graph utilization in AI systems, because I think now you cannot, get a degree in computer science without learning about AI. And in fact, everybody wants to learn AI. So I want to, like, talk about how knowledge graphs and web technologies can be utilized in AI, and vice versa, how AI can utilized to improve web-based systems. So as you saw from my previous slides, knowledge graphs provide a structured and interconnected information that improves data representation, context understanding, and interoperability. And in the context of AI systems, knowledge graphs can provide context for local data, improve things like feature extraction and data preprocessing, and overall increase the quality of the data going into the knowledge graphs. With, like, things like cleaning and validating and cross-referencing with domain knowledge, for example. So I want to talk about, like, different learning architectures. So you probably have heard of things like, or not heard, like, you probably have done local learning, where you download a model to your computer, you have some local data sets, and you build a model where you have a localized data and model. You probably have also heard about central and maybe even, like, done centralized learning, where you have these cloud-based systems, and you can upload data and the model to the cloud. And the cloud provides more resources, and because it has access to all the data, it has very good accuracy, but at the cost of privacy and other issues. And then there is federated learning. So in federated learning, you're not really sharing the data. So data lives on the edge. And then you have all the model parameters in a centralized location. So these models, they travel to the edges, learn from the local data, and then gets back into the centralized, like, server. And then it does, like, things like averaging or something or the other, and then update the global model, and it sends back, right? And then it will converge at some point. Now, there's a new kind of learning called swarm learning, not to be confused with the swarm contracts I mentioned earlier. So in swarm learning, all of these, like, edges, they act like a swarm in learning the model, or, like, in training the model. So this is, this is kind of similar to federated learning, but instead of the central server doing the model aggregation, a smart contract will elect the next node to do the model aggregation. And then it'll do the aggregation. All the nodes will communicate in a peer-to-peer manner. And then in the next epoch, it'll be another, node that does the model aggregation. So this way, we can ensure it's democratic, there's no central server. So if the central server goes down, the learning essentially stops. But in swarm learning, you don't have to be constrained by that. You can keep learning, and even if one of the nodes goes down. And then with respect to privacy preservation, of course there can be some leaks happening, but there are mitigation strategies like applying some noise using techniques like differential privacy that can minimize privacy issues. And then specifically, when it comes to the incentive and the model training and inference, we are now very much used using things like ChatGPT, right? So that's hosted by a large corporation, and in fact, with large language models, it's inconceivable to run it locally. So somebody else has to do that. And then for the problem of training these models with publicly available data, right? We have worked out several strategies for that, where our contributors can submit the data along with the deposit. The deposit is because we don't want anybody to poison the model with bad data, but they get the money back if that data is deemed to be good quality data. And yeah, the contributors get a reward after submitting good quality data, and the model remains free to use for inference, just like how we have things like ChatGPT, and even on Hugging Face as this interface for interacting with these very large machine learning models. Yeah, so the model remains free. And with respect to incentive mechanisms, there are many ways to encourage contributors to submit good quality data. There's gamification, like giving badges based on things like prediction markets, where you give out a prediction, and if that is satisfied, you get some payout, or you can do something like a self-assessment where we do something like what I described earlier, where there's a deposit, refund, and take method. So in our simulations, even in the face of bad agents frequently adding incorrect data, the model will give good accuracy. Now, I want to leave some time for questions, and I have a few more slides to go through. Let's see. Are there any more questions, or should I just keep going? All right, so I'll keep going. So next, I want to introduce briefly about a very application-centric knowledge graph called the Food Knowledge Graph. So I'm shifting research areas, over here. And you can take a look at this particular resource. We are very proud of this particular resource. And what this enables is given some different personas. And if you ask a question about suggest a good breakfast with eggs, it'll provide some suggested recipes. But if, let's say, this particular person is older and a male and diabetic, it'll provide an appropriate response. So behind the scenes, we have knowledge graphs, we have some advanced question and answering techniques, which I will not go through. But if you are interested, we have these ingredient substitutions heuristics that are leveraging both implicit and explicit semantics, and many publicly available data sources like USDA data source, food ontology. Yeah, so this is a very, very rich resource. And since I mentioned about the incentivization, let's say you want to contribute your family recipe about some cookie, right? So we developed this blockchain-based mechanism where users are incentivized to submit good quality recipes, and users are rewarded for getting or like putting in a novel recipe. And this novelty is determined using some AI mechanism. And then other users can buy the rights to publish the recipe just like an NFT. So the recipe is somewhat free, but like, you don't really own the resource. Okay, how are we doing on time? Okay. I just want to leave some time for questions, or I can like keep going. In fact, I'll finish. Like I only have 2 slides. So the next, again, jumping topics quite drastically. So we've done like some fraud analysis using knowledge graph techniques. So social media, Twitter, like there's a lot of bot activity. There are fraudulent things, right? So this is an example from 4 years ago, actually more than 4 years ago, where prominent accounts on Twitter got hacked not because of like it was a social engineering attack where these attackers got access to the administrative console of Twitter, and then they changed, or like then they hijacked accounts of verified high-profile users like Joe Biden, and then they put this scam. And this was taken down quite fast because these are high-profile accounts. But before they were taken down, like more than 320 transactions. I think this got taken down in the matter of minutes, but still like a lot of harm was done. So our research question was like, given an ongoing scam like this, can we figure out a way to flag these scam addresses? So the answer is yes, by analyzing the transaction graph, which can be turned into a knowledge graph. And there are various patterns that we can see from these like transactions. Scammers can inject money into these scam addresses before the scam events. And then after some money is added, it's transferred through multiple accounts to obscure the scammer's identity. So there are various patterns in cybersecurity literature, and it's not a static thing, like it keeps growing, and the scam tactics actually keep changing. So a solution was to like use this tool called provenance analyzer, which we developed. And here, like we have this particular transaction graph, and we have bunch of this is the suspicious address, and we are trying to figure out if this particular individual is a scammer or not. And then like we basically analyze the transactions along with the transaction timestamps. And then like specific characteristics of some nodes, like maybe this is an exchange, which is the exit point of the scam, the crime money. So we have that tool available, and yeah, so we were able to identify these scam addresses with very high accuracy. So with that, I want to, conclude my presentation because I only have 2 minutes left. But I want to, encourage you all to do, impactful research. And there are many, many venues that are related to web research. For example, ACM Web Conference will be in Sydney, Australia. ACM Web Science Conference will be in New Jersey in the US. ACM Web Search and Data Mining will be in Hanover. An International Semantic Web Conference will be like, in a few months' time, actually in November in the US. So, and if you're interested in these kinds of doing research and publishing at conferences, I'm more than happy to collaborate and give you advice. And finally, I want to leave you with this takeaway. There's a lot of research potential to explore the synergistic combinations of the web, knowledge graphs, and AI. And if you are interested in learning about the history of the web, last year, along with Jim Hendler, I co-edited a book on Tim Berners-Lee's work called Linking the World's Information. So this has Tim's perspectives on the web and also perspectives from many scholars in this area. So I will conclude my talk at that, and I welcome any questions from the audience. And I have also left my email address, so feel free to contact me if you have any questions that you want to discuss offline. Okay, so there is a question: as undergraduates, how can we engage in those research conferences? So I think before conferences, I think you have to do research, right? So you have to figure out what you're passionate about. And of course, you also need to have some free time because research takes time and it doesn't happen overnight. So you have to, actually have a good mentor, first of all. If you're an undergrad, I'm assuming you don't have any prior research experience. So talk to your professors in the university and, kind of have an open discussion. I personally like to hear, students' ideas rather than pushing my ideas on them. I want them to come up with the, research problems. So I think, yeah, you have to talk to a mentor and then figure out what you want to do. And then with respect to research, it's not like taking a class. So I tell my students, if you are doing research, you have to, plan your time accordingly. So spend 1/3 of your time reading what other people have done, and learn what the state of the art is. And then another third of your time should be actually doing the work that you are motivated about, right? So you have to do some work and then spend another third of your time telling other people what you have done, right? Because first of all, it doesn't have to be a fully polished work. It can be work in progress work, and getting early feedback will actually help a lot to refine your work. And if you don't really talk to other people or communicate your research effectively, then that also doesn't work out well. So remember this 1/3 rule when you're doing research. And actually, if you're an undergrad, you might not have all the background. So make sure you have taken the necessary courses, right? You have a strong foundation, because learning foundations is very, very important, because otherwise you will think about reinventing the wheel or doing something that's infeasible, right? Because there are theoretical limitations in computer science, right? So unless you're planning on breaking those limitations, P versus NP, you have to have a very, very strong background. So even if you're trying to prove P equals NP, you have to have that strong foundation. So I think yeah, so do this 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 thing. And in terms of research conferences specifically, I guess some of these conferences are very, very tough conferences to get in. But you should still don't be shy. You should submit your work, see what these international reviewers are saying about your work, and you can always improve that work. And one thing about research is that you will get rejections a lot than acceptances. So you have to have a thick skin and always keep persevering. So you have to have that kind of mindset. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, madam. And there's another question that was raised during the registration. And how do we face the current competition of web development career?
So you're asking about web development as a software engineer, or?
Yes, yeah, madam, I guess.
Okay. I guess you have to excel at what you're doing, and I think you have to welcome competition, right? So if everything is coming to you easily, right? So there's actually not much fun in it. I think challenges shape your character, right? If you're not challenged enough, I don't think the work is going to be, excellent. So I think you have to, first of all, embrace the competition. And how do you embrace the competition? Like, being the best person that you could be, right? And I'm not talking about like being a cutthroat person or something like that, but you have to be collaborative. But I think excelling at what you want to do is very important. And now I'm not a web developer. I'm a web researcher, so there's a difference, right? So I don't know if you mean by something like developing websites or something like that, like a designer kind of person. If that's the intention, I think you have to have a portfolio of what you have done, and you can keep on innovating on this portfolio. And this is true even for research, right? So if you are a researcher, you want to have a website that lists these are my research projects, these are my research publications, so that you can advertise your work. You'll be visible that way, right, to recruiters, and they'll know that, hey, if I hire this particular person, they're going to do amazing things like what they have done, what she has done, as evident from this portfolio. So I guess I would recommend that, don't be discouraged with the competition. It's something you should expect. And then try to be the best self you can, by learning all the material and, keeping this, portfolio of projects. So that's my answer. Any other questions?
Thank you, madam. It seems like it's the end of the questions, and it was really awesome.
I just saw the question in the chat. Do you want me to take that, or? So it's she's asking, in case of Sri Lanka, do we have any resource challenges to do research in Web3? I don't think so. Many of computer science research, well, okay, I take it back for things like AI systems, where you will require, GPUs, these high capital equipment. But for Web3 research, in fact, a lot of Web3 research has thrived outside of the so-called rich countries, because there is an immediate need, when it comes to things like currency, people actually want to have an alternate form of currency because the governments are corrupt or whatever, right? So I think, yeah, resource challenges wise, I guess you need a computer as a resource. And the web has a wealth of knowledge on how to learn these technologies. And with blockchain research, I tell my students never to buy actual cryptocurrencies which cost money. There's always fake money that you can play with. So it wouldn't cost you anything. So my short answer is there are no resource challenges to do research in Web3. Okay, I have another question now. How was your experience at MIT doing your higher studies after bachelor's? It would be nice to hear from you as for motivation. Yeah, my experience at MIT was great. I actually spent 7 years there, 2 years for my master's and then 5 years for my PhD. So one big change I had was at Moratour, I was doing pretty well. I had very good grades and whatnot. And at MIT, everybody's good. So I had that kind of initial shock where, hey, I'm not one of the best students. I'm pretty much average or maybe even below average. So I had that initial kind of culture shock, so to speak. But everybody is so friendly. There are very, very famous people walking around all the time, Turing Award winners, Nobel laureates, very famous people. So I felt really privileged to be in the company of all those great minds and learn from them. So I encourage, and I was a undergraduate just like you all, finishing my studies at Moratour before I applied. So and I honestly didn't think I would get in, but I got in. And I think doing some research helped in my application. And I was also an open source committer. So I guess the admissions committee could see that I was not only good at my coursework, not only did I have good grades, but I've shown that I can engage in international research. So that also helped. So I encourage, if you're interested to kind of follow the same things that I did. Things have changed a lot. Like I think now we are seeing in the admissions committees, there are very, very superstar candidates who have so many papers published in very, very good venues. So things are getting tough right now compared to when I was applying. But still, I think you can do it. Like, it's not too early to, not too late to start, and start early, really. Like, I don't think you had to wait until the 4th year of your undergrad to start thinking about, doing research. In fact, that's something that helped me. Like, I knew what I wanted to do maybe in the 2nd year of my undergraduate degree. So that helped me prepare. Like, I started reading research papers. I took some advanced courses at the university. So I encourage you to do the same. And even if you're in the final stages of your undergrad, it's still not late. Like, I think you can still make a mark by, starting now, right? So there's no better time than now.
Thank you very much, madam, and good evening. On behalf of the IEEE Women in Engineering Student Branch Affinity Group of the University of Jaffna, I would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed speaker, Professor Oshani Seneviratne, for sharing her insights with us today. Dear madam, your comprehensive overview of web's evolution from hypertext to decentralized web, reflecting on the World Wide Web's legacy and pioneering the future with knowledge graphs and Web3 technologies, has undoubtedly enlightened us all and provided invaluable knowledge today. We deeply appreciate the time, effort, and expertise you generously shared with us. Madam, please accept the virtual token of appreciation we have prepared as a small gesture of our gratitude. I would also like to extend a warm thank you to all the participants who took the time to join us tonight. And as we come to an end of today's session, it's perfectly okay if you're unable to switch on the cameras, but we request everyone to join us for a group photo, and it would be wonderful to capture this moment together. And thank you once again, and have a wonderful evening.
You're very welcome. Thank you.